You are welcome. Thank you. I believe at this point it is endorsed for me to now invite up for his welcome Dr. Tunji Ashaolu.
Your Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented by the Honorable Ministers of Federal Capital Territory, Malams Mohamed Bello, Your Excellencies, the Executive Governors of Sokoto State, Right Honorable Aminu Wasiri Tamboa, Our Excellencies, the Honorable Ministers of Women Affairs, Dame Polintani, the Honorable Ministers here present, Permanent Secretary, members of National Assembly, invited guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good evening. It is my utmost and sincere pleasure to welcome you on behalf of myself and on behalf of the Third Permanent General Assembly of the African Union's Economic, Social, and Cultural Council, AU ECOSOCC, to today's event. Today's event symbolized the official flag off of the domestications of the African Union new decade, 2020-2030, African women's and girl child financial and economic inclusions in Nigeria. Let me also seize this opportunity to firstly thank the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs, Her Excellencies Dame Politani, OFR, the Permanent Secretary of Women Affairs, and the entire staff of Federal Ministry of Women Affairs for the role they play in making today's event a reality. I say thank you all. Again, today's event is an historic legacy and a new dawn for Nigeria. It is a legacy because Nigeria will be one of the few African countries to domesticate this new decade. This is a proof of leadership and commitment to women and gender issues in Nigeria. Recall that during the February 2020 African Union Summit held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, afforded African women and girls various platforms and opportunity to rally support and advance actions toward the implementations of commitments on gender equality and women's empowerment. Their efforts translated into the declarations of year 2020 to year 2030 as the new decade of women's financial and economic inclusion. In these declarations, African leaders recommended to scale up action for the progressive gender inclusions towards sustainable development at the national, regional, and continental levels. Furthermore, as declared by the AU Summit of Head of State and Government during the 33rd AU Summit in February 2020, one of the main objectives of this new Africa Women's Decade is the development of market access by enhancing new credit solutions for women, generating access to infrastructure in downstream processing and distribution, as well as training them in agro-industrial technology. In addition to access financial product technology and services, as every financial inclusion for women will require overcoming socio-cultural norms and gender barriers. For us in AU ECOSOCC, we recognize this Nigeria performance in the previous 2 decades, year 2000 to year 2010, which is African Union's decade of gender equality and grassroots mobilization. Then year 2021 2011 to year 2020, which is African Union's decade of women engagement and empowerment. While we appreciate the efforts of the Nigerian government on the strike it has played so far in these 2 decades, more needs to be done. Hence, necessitated the need for domestications of the new decades, 2020 to 2030, to drum support from the AU system and other international partners in addressing the below-average performance, challenges, and chances for Nigerian women and girl child to contribute to Nigeria's and Africa's development. There are many common challenges facing women and girl child in Africa. Nigeria is not an exception, but there are a lot of programs initiated by this present administration that are pointers toward a direction of recovery for Nigerian women. We say kudos to Mr. President, President Muhammadu Buhari, who always give attention to the issues related to Nigerian women. Apart from the fact that Nigeria is one of the countries in Africa that have a dedicated ministry for women in response to the United Nations agreement to establish institutional mechanism for the advancement of women and women's matter. Luckily, Mr. President also appointed a qualified personality as a driver of the ministry, who is always up and doing, mobilizing support for women development. You also agree with me that of recent, Mr. President approved 45% fund of the Small and Medium Scale Enterprise Fund to be reserved exclusively for women, while 5% goes to other vulnerable groups. This is a step in the right direction towards improving women's empowerment and girl child education. With our collective effort to achieve our set target, you will agree with me that the implementation of this new decade has started through the initiative of Mr. President. He is a man with foresight. We thank him very sincerely and we request him to do more, because our best is not the best until we achieve the best. We call on all and sundry, especially those of us here present, as a strategic stakeholders, to follow suit by keying into the laid down strategy of Mr. President, using this new decade framework as a policy guide. The question now is, what is our expectation from this new decade of year 2020 to 2030 as the new decade of women's financial and economic inclusion? According to the World Bank, more than 70% of the African women are excluded by the financial institutions or are unable to receive financial services such as savings or credit account, loans, credit, and other institutional services with adequate conditions to meet their needs. However, the domestication of this new decade will break this barrier. We have developed a robust plan to work closely with Central Bank of Nigeria and other financial institutions. We will also seeking for guidance on how a dedicated bank can be established for Nigerian women and get child for easy accessibility, whereby reducing bureaucracy. To achieve this, we will examine the regulatory, legislative, and policy content to determine the changes needed to foster the financial inclusion of women and to assist financial institutions in adopting approaches tailored to women as separate market segments. We have put up a multi-strategic and innovative approach in place to improve financial, economic, social, and political landscape for 10 million women and 25 million girls over the next 10 years, covering federal, state, local governments in Nigeria through, but not limited to following: sustainable education programs, which we tag Street to School project, aims at enhancing girl child quality education, e-school projects, and capacity training and teachers, etc. To achieve this, we'll be working with state government, local governments across the federations, institutions, private sectors, international partners, and well-meaning Nigerians. We have appointed ambassadors to drive this initiative. His Excellency Right Honorable Aminu Tambuwa, and Dr. Rhoda Makinde have been appointed as an ambassador and face to give this initiative a new look. Dr. Rhoda Makinde has also indicated interest by using our foundations, which is targeting on women empowerment, to also drive this initiative. Her Excellency, Honorable Ministers of Women Affairs, also commissions a project which is titled Women's Science Education in Sokoto State. We will be building on this development by expanding the scope by suiting Sokoto State as a pilot stage in implementing what we are doing here today, while on agreements. Arrangements are also on ground to cover the rest of the states. Ladies and gentlemen, I therefore call on other African countries to replicate this model and maximize investment in women in order to reduce discriminations and enhance their participation in social issues, creating an enabling environment for women to engage, including those in rural areas, by ensuring that they participate in the bottom-up approach on poverty eradication. We strongly call on government at all levels to increase awareness for women participation in governance, as this remains as a fatal tool to bridge the gap currently experienced, build strong institutional framework by the political will to expand financial and economic inclusions and compensation for women and get child as soon as possible, as this will place Nigeria on the spotlight of enviable status as nations that have increased gender equalities and empowerment in all ramifications. On behalf of myself and my colleagues, once again, I welcome you to this event. Thank you for this opportunity to welcome you all. Thank you. Please sit back and enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, once again, a round of applause. Let's appreciate him, Mr. Tunji Ashaulo. And yes, our Nigerian representative at AU ECOSOCC has said it. Our best is not the best until...
Good afternoon, Your Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented by Malam Mohammed Bello, Minister for the FCT, Her Excellency, Dame, a woman of no equal comparison, a go-getter, a pathfinder, a mentor, Dame Pauline Tallen. We'd also want to recognize the governor, our own ambassador, the role model and the face for the African Union Women's Decade 2020 to 2030 Financial Inclusion for Women and Girls, His Excellency Aminu Waziri Tambuwal. Would like to also welcome all permanent secretaries representing the ministers at this noble event. Permit me to stand on all protocols observed. Today, history has been made, and it is a day significant out of the rest for the Nigerian woman. Also for the Nigerian girl child. The flag of the decade 2020 to 2030, financial inclusion for women and girls in Nigeria, is generally very significant in our time as we continue to raise the bar and push the narrative, break barriers on seeing more women participate in governance, leadership, become empowered to have financial inclusion, especially for the girl child to become empowered, to enable her to acquire an education, and therefore providing her with the enabling environment. This presentation is really nothing but the benefit of what this decade 2020 to 2030 African Union Financial Inclusion for Women and Girl Child is about. Where we were, where we are now, and where we hope to be at least by 2030. Now, if you look at that graph, you will see a simple but yet significant representation of the financial inclusion in Nigeria between the year 2008 and 2016. Now, the red cursor signifies the informal only, and you look at the green where you have the formal sector. The banked is also representing the green color, and the red is representing the excluded. Now, if you look at from 2008, you had 77%, to 2010 you had 64%, down to 57% in 2012, all the way down to 2016. Now, when you look at the population below that chart, what you also seem to also see represented is the change in number of adults in each category and the number of adults that represent women. Now, the banked sector, you will find 9% average annual growth in actual number of adults between 2008 to 2016 representing women. Other formal sectors are also there, and then minus 2% also shows you the number of excluded. Next. The February 2020 African Union Summit, which was held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, afforded African women and girls across various platforms the opportunity to rally support and advance actions towards the implementation of commitment on gender equality and women's empowerment. That singular movement, that singular initiative, translated into what we call today the Declaration of Year 2020 to 2030 as a new decade of women's financial and economic inclusion. Now, what that declaration means is that African leaders are committed to scale action for progressive gender inclusion towards sustainable employment, sustainable development at both the national, the regional, and of course the continental level. Now, a recent report on the status of gender and development in Africa, which was also presented to the African Union Assembly heads of state during that summit, also showed that gender equality and women empowerment is the only solution to sustainable development. Now, when you look at countries such as Rwanda, Namibia, South Africa, Senegal, among other countries in the world, these 10 countries are similarly the ones with the highest level of women representation in their parliaments. Others, such as Ethiopia, have for the first time, like we have seen, achieved parity in government, at least 50% of his cabinet. And also we know recently appointed his first female president. 16 member states have surpassed the 30% threshold of women's representation in national parliament with leadership. Further, we have seen neighboring countries like our neighbor Ghana, also Madagascar, Mozambique, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Liberia, and Mali have reduced significantly the gender gaps in terms of access and attainment of education. However, the laudable achievements, the African Union Commission and Gender Development Directorate says there is still more effort, and of course, if Nigeria is not there, I think we're still talking. You look at the global financial inclusion insights by gender. Now, the dark green represents men, and the light for the women. Kenya, 72% for the men, the women 65%. Nigeria, 44%, the women a miserly 30%. Uganda, 47% for the male and 32% for the female. Tanzania, we have 67%, and for the female, we have 58%. And in that list, who is the giant of Africa? Nigeria. And we are lagging behind a country like Uganda at 30%. What is our expectation from this new declaration of year 2020 to 2030 as a new decade for women's financial inclusion? This decade, I can tell you, is enormous. And the enormous importance for it for the African woman, most importantly for the Nigerian women and the girl child. It is time for us to build momentum and consolidate the gains realized over the years in the efforts to close the existing gaps. We all know that inequality, poverty are closely knitted, intertwined, and therefore the decade in which we are, this decade, focuses especially on building strategic engagement around catalyzing, breaking the circle that has held women and girls back for many, many decades. So, in terms of economic inclusion, the declaration is particularly timely, and I'm sure you will agree, as women account for over 70% of the informal sector when we are even looking at cross-border traders at a time the continent has been scheduled to kicking off trading under African Continental Free Trade Area. We know that there are many benefits among the provisions such as reduction of both tariff and non-tariff barriers and implementing the simplified trade regimes which will make it more affordable for women that are informal traders whose population are more women to operate through informal sectors. So what this means, ladies and gentlemen, is that, for instance, women can also benefit from initiatives to connect female agricultural workers to export food markets, increase the export of natural resources homegrown in Nigeria, while also creating an enabling environment for women, expanding subsistence farming, moving to agri-mechanized farming as well. What we can also say is that this requires particular attention, specific to the proportions of the women population that have been singularly excluded from the formal financial sector, either because of income level, the volatility, their gender, location, type of activity. Level of financial literacy is amongst many of that. So, in doing so, there is a need for us to harness the untapped potential of these individuals who are women and give future hope to our future girl child. It is also good for us to look at women in business currently excluded from the formal financial sector or undeserved and enable them to develop their capacity, strengthen their human and physical capital, engage in income generation activities, manage risk associated with their livelihood. What we mean by financial inclusion of women throughout the decade is to seek to strengthen the financial services for women, to empower women, and to also broaden the space for women. When you look at the next graph, what you see is levels of monthly income, education, and trust in FSPs for women versus men and the population. On the green, you see the men, and on the gray, you see the women, down to where you find 31% for the women and 20% for the men. Now, you look at no education, you look at non-formal, you look at primary, you look at secondary, you look at post-secondary. Now, what we are trying to tie to this presentation in this graph is the need that when you financially empower a woman, she's also able to educate her children and also be able to empower herself by taking care of her immediate family. In figure 3, next slide, please. The exclusion and levels of monthly income, education, and trust in FSPs for rural versus urban populations, especially when you look at the men and women, will also show you on the far left, what we have is exclusion, when you look at, is 1.7 times as high in rural communities as in urban ones when you look at population. And when you look at the far right, you find that rural communities also have lower monthly income education in FSB. A clear example for me is in the rural area, when a woman goes to farm, she hardly gets deserved wages for her labor, but the men are paid. And the question is why? They put in the same level of effort and the same level of hard work. What is our expectation from this new declaration of 2020 to 2030? This decade, we say, is very important for the girl child, and the future is female, and that future is now. Next slide, please. The linkages between core factors, you look at drive, demand, next slide, and thereby incentive the supply of relevant financial services. Now, on the far left, key factors influencing demand for financial services and inclusion. First, you have education. You can see income, you can see relevance, and you can see that there is a correlation between education and income. You can also see sufficient income increase for the need. Income increase increases the need for and relevance of financial services. Now, education leads to increased ability to understand and financial terms, hence increased trust in FSPs. Now, financial inclusion levers look at demand for financial services, supply of relevant financial services, which equals to financial inclusion. So I'm sure the Exim Bank is taking note of some of these things. And according to World Bank, finally, more than 70% of African women, and especially women and children, are excluded by financial institutions, or they are unable to receive financial services such as savings. And we know, and I know we are confident in Nigeria now, that we have signed a memorandum of understanding between the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, please a round of applause for our minister, our able mommy, she made that happen, and the African Union Economic, Social, and Cultural Council, Nigeria. The most important and main objective for us gathering here today is to improve and expand women and girl child financial, economic, social, and political life landscape in Nigeria. We are lagging behind. We are the mother of Africa. We are the frontliners, yet we are abysmal in number. To consistently hold stakeholders' dialogue is what we have started today. And we know and we hope that going forward, that we know that this is a first step in the right direction. And like they say, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step. It is a clarion call. Some would say a tall order, but we believe that the journey has begun. And we have with this presentation of what and where we are, what we want, and what we hope to be together as a country, with a collective call that all hands must be on deck. We are able to present and bring to bear a new Nigeria with every one of us here taking a vow to push the barriers that hinder women, where every woman counts and gender inclusivity is at the foremost. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
I would now like to invite Her Excellency, the Honorable Minister for Women Affairs, Her Excellency Dame Pauline Talon, for her very special remarks today for this event, for this flag off, and without any question, beyond it just being a domestication and implementation of the new decade and celebrating financial inclusivity for the African woman, for her, it is a game changer and one that establishes a differentiation in the global space of the African woman and the Nigerian woman in her place of financial inclusion. Nigeria once again taking the lead, and Her Excellency, Dame Pauline Talon. Let's put our hands together as we welcome her up. Remember, as she comes up, it's always the chorus of the women's anthem. We'll sing our song for women everywhere. Let it ring around the world and never, never cease to sing our song.
For women everywhere, equality, development, and peace. Thank you. Please be seated. Your Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented by my dear brother, the FCT Minister, Mohammed Musa Bello, Your Excellency, the Executive Governor of Sokoto State, my dear brother, Right Honorable Aminu Tambuwal, the representative of the First Lady of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Dr. Hajo Sani, distinguished Senator Rochas Okorocha, a very dear brother, former governor of Imo State, and a distinguished senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, members of the National Assembly here present, representative of honorable ministers here present. I'm particularly happy that my dear sister, the Honorable Minister of Finance, has sent her permanent secretary to represent her. The Honorable Minister of Humanitarian Affairs has also sent my dear brother, Dr. Bindir, to represent her. And the Honorable Minister of Water Resources has also sent a representative. I appreciate you all. My own permanent secretary, Dr. Ambassador Antonia Akpa, the Nigerian representative to African Union ECOSOCC, Tunji Asaolu, permanent secretaries, heads of agencies, commissioners from states, members of the diplomatic corps, Your Excellency, my dear sister, former Deputy Governor of Lagos State, Her Excellency Adefulere Adejoke, Senior Special Advisor to the President on SDGs, the founder, Dromi, Ambassador Rhoda Makinde, and her very able husband, Honorable Makinde, a true he for she. I appreciate men who support their wives. Please give him a big round of applause. Ambassador Rhoda can fly because she has the full support of her husband. I urge all men in this room to keep supporting their wives for a better Nigeria. Representatives of our international agencies, UN Women, UNFPA, UNDP, and all our partners, civil society organizations, my dear Adora Onyechere, head of Women and Gender, AU ECOSOCC, and her team. You know, the young are growing. We are supporting the young ones. And I can see Zainab Marwa, who is coming up well. I can see Lola. I can see Irene, and so many young girls that, by the grace of God, come 2023. What we missed out in the last election, God willingly, with what we are doing today, with this milestone, they will step into their dreams. So don't give up. Beautiful, distinguished women of Nigeria, great Nigerian women. I appreciate you, I celebrate you. I can see my dear sister, distinguished Senator Hirat Gwadabe, the first female senator in FCT. I can see my dear sister, Ambassador Fati Goni, a great fighter for the cause of women and children, and a grassroots mobilizer for President Muhammadu Buhari. Distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are still in the month of March, where the world is celebrating women all over the world, and Nigeria can never be an exception. I appreciate representatives of governors here present. I can see the representative of the governor of Abia State, and all our partners, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to deliver these remarks at this very important event aimed at enhancing the leadership of Nigerian women, socio-economy, and status. I'd like to appreciate Your Excellency's support for women at various times and for being part of this great occasion. One of the outcomes of the February 2020 African Union Summit held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, was the declaration of the years 2020 to 2030 as the new decade of women's financial and economic inclusion. In the declaration, African leaders recommitted to scale up actions for the progressive gender inclusion towards sustainable development at the national, regional, and continental levels. The first African Women's Decade, 2010 to 2020, was a grassroots approach to gender equality and women's empowerment, and a very important decade for the women of this continent, as it was a critical time to advance gender equality by accelerating the implementation of agreed global and regional commitments, particularly that of Dakar, gender, and AU Assembly decisions on gender equality and women's empowerment. The African Women Decade had 10 themes which were implemented on an annual basis through the financial support of the Fund for African Women. This new decade declaration of year 2020 to 2030 on women's financial and economic inclusion being flagged off today is to make significant progress in improving the lives and livelihoods of millions of Nigerian women and young girls. And that means leaving no one behind, because when you empower a woman, you empower the family, the community, and the country at large. One of the main objectives of this new decade is the development of market access through new credit solutions for women, generating access for infrastructure in downstream processing and distribution, as well as training them in agro-industrial technology. Achieving financial inclusion for women would require overcoming socio-cultural norms and gender barriers. As the national machinery for the advancement of women in the country, I call on the civil societies and the women bodies at all levels to support our efforts to enable us meet the commitments on women's equality and empowerment. This decade is of great importance for the average Nigerian woman and our young girls to build the momentum and consolidate the gains realized over the years in its effort to close the existing socio-economic gender gaps. As you may be aware, inequality and poverty are intertwined, and therefore, this decade's focus is on building strategies around catalyzing and breaking that cycle that has held women and girls back for many decades. And at this point, that's where we will agree that we must focus more on the girl-child education. And in that area, I commend and celebrate my dear brother, the governor of Sokoto State, for the great giant strides he's making in the girl-child education. I remember when we went for the community engagement program with the whole UN agencies, he gave us a big surprise because I was made to commission huge buildings of girls' science secondary schools exclusively for girls. And that stands out. No wonder he was decorated as a true he for she. We'll keep acknowledging all governors that support the cause of women and support the women's agenda. The decade is of great importance for the average Nigerian woman and our young girls to build the momentum and consolidate the gains realized over the years in its efforts to close the existing socio-economic gender gaps. As you may be aware, inequality and poverty are the greatest disease that affects a nation. In terms of economic inclusion, the declaration is particularly timely as women account for 70% of the informal cross-border trades, and at this time, the continent is scheduled to kick off trading under the African Continental Trade Area. Among the benefits of this common market is the reduction of both tariff and non-tariff barriers and implementing these simplified trade regimes, which will make it more affordable for informal trades to cooperate through formal channels. We expect similar momentum and push because the national experience will not be realized in a vacuum. But through a gender-sensitive socio-political economic policies, a sound business environment and political commitment is needed. In so doing, there is a need to harness and untap potentials of those individuals and businesses currently excluded from the formal financial sector of undeserved and enable them to develop their capacity, strengthen their human and physical capital, engage in income-generating activities, and manage risks associated with their livelihoods. The financial inclusion of women throughout the decade will help to strengthen financial services and capacity building, especially for women living in rural areas, to gain access to technology and to use it to increase productivity in all industrial sectors and with tailor-made financial products for the women, to have access to not only formal but reliable means to save, access, and borrow money. Permit me to say financial inclusion is a major driver of economic development in Africa. However, access to financial services by individuals and enterprises is still limited across the continent. Gender plays a particularly important role as women are much more financially excluded than men. The various challenges differ from country to country. Despite overall progress in financial inclusion, the gender gaps in account ownership has remained stubbornly persistent at 9%. Explosion and vulnerability of women than men, underpinned by social norms which are not well understood or tackled by financial inclusion programs. It's at this point that we must commend President Muhammadu Buhari for the support he has given women by giving 45% of the SMSE programs strictly to women, while 5% to the vulnerable women. I call on all governors in our states to continue to engage more women and inclusion of women in the states and local government for a better developmental strategies. Before I end these remarks, I want to specially acknowledge and celebrate all my staff, the directors, and my senior special assistants for the great work they are doing in the ministry, and the team of Tunji to please stand up. AU ECOSOCC staff and Women Affairs, SA, and all directors, please stand up for special recognition. All the young ones, the young ladies in ECOSOCC, AU, I celebrate you all. Keep up the good work, and by the grace of God, we will change the narrative come 2023 with the support of all of you. I also want to acknowledge that all the men gathered here today who believe in the cause of women and who have taken time to be here, God will bless you. And I will celebrate and call you a he for she for believing in the cause of women and for being here. My dear brother, the representative of Mr. President, the FCT Minister, I am waiting, and very soon I'll be in your office to decorate you as a he for she for the great work you are doing in FCT. And you know that having that honor goes with a lot. So I believe you are equal to the task, and you will give more space to women, not just in the FCT, but also at all your area councils. Therefore, the domestication of the African Women's Decade will go a long way in helping us to address the complex issues around the women's financial inclusion. I thank you for listening, and God bless.
To state, Mr. Performer, the man who is taking Sokoto to the next level, in person of Alhaji Tambuwa. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Mr. President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, ably represented by my senior brother, the Honorable Minister of FCT, Alhaji Mohammed Musa Bello, members of the National Assembly here present, of special note, distinguished Senator Rochas Okorocha, former governor of Imo State, and my dear brother, a member of the House of Reps, Honorable Makinde and his wife. The wife of the president, ably represented, the Honorable Minister for Women Affairs, my dear sister, I must commend President Muhammadu Buhari for giving you the opportunity to do what you are known best for, promoting the cause of humanity and particularly women. Governors represented, honorable ministers represented, my good friend, Dr. Tunji Asaolu and his team from AU ECOSOCC, members of the Diplomatic Corps, other partners here present, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to you all. I must begin my remark by thanking the Honorable Minister for Women Affairs for creating this platform and for the invitation extended me to be part of this epoch-making event in collaboration with AU ECOSOCC. It is indeed a very, very important event that marks the beginning, formally, of the rolling out of the Agenda 2020-2030 for financial inclusion, economic and financial inclusion of women in Africa. We have been on it as a government in Sokoto State since our coming on board. We know the challenges, we know how Sokoto has been seen and viewed, irrespective of the fact that we have had women in Sokoto that have made very, very significant impact on the life of the Sokoto Caliphate over 200 years ago, but they seem to have been forgotten. Nana Asmau, the daughter of Usman Danfodio, wrote several books on Islamic theology, on women and women development, and several issues of human endeavor. And she has remained one of the most leading women in the history of Sokoto Caliphate. And of course, of recent, we have just sent forth a chief judge in the state who, for the first time, a female, had served Sokoto State government as chief judge for 20 years. On that seat as chief judge, not on the bench, as, not the entirety of her career. So we are not just starting now, we have been on it. And in our current government in Sokoto, we have been doing our maximum best to ensure the involvement of women in political affairs and leadership. For example, for the first time in the history of Sokoto State, we have in the cabinet, under a civilian administration, 3 female commissioners, several permanent secretaries, and directors general. Even our SOSMEDA, the flagship for our economic empowerment, the director general is a female, and her name is Haja Toure Al-Hassan. And the only microfinance bank that we have established, sponsored fully by the government of Sokoto State, is also being headed by yet another woman, and coincidentally, her name is also Toure Garba Nadama. In our efforts to ensure that we improve the financial capacity and empowerment of our women, when we came up as a government on our second term with a program of 4 billion naira for the empowerment of 200,000 beneficiaries, we made it 50-50, 100,000 women, 100,000 men, and the program is ongoing. And that is to promote financial inclusion. It's a grant. It's not just a loan. It's a grant that we are giving to beneficiaries throughout the state. We are also doing a lot with our own SOSMEDA by promoting SMEs. Recently, in collaboration with Bank of Industries, we gave out loans of over 2 billion naira, and 30% of it was reserved and dedicated to our women entrepreneurs in the state. When our women entrepreneurs came together to do their trade fair for the first time in Sokoto, 189 of them, of their companies and their enterprises, we supported each of them with 150,000 naira for them to support their capital and to enhance their capital base. On girl-child education, in collaboration with Sultan Foundation, that foundation, under the leadership of His Eminence the Sultan of Sokoto, is coming up with the first all-girl university, Nana Asma'u University of Medical Sciences in Sokoto. The government of Sokoto State has given them the temporary site. We have given them land, and we are processing with the NUC for the establishment and takeoff of that university, all-women university of medical sciences. Of course, the Honorable Minister has mentioned that we are doing quite a lot in supporting girl child education. When we came on board, we established an agency for girl child education, and we are also using the same agency for cash transfers to support indigent women who are sending their daughters to go and be hawking, and who have agreed to now relinquish that kind of way of trade by now supporting each of their daughters with a cash transfer. If you have one daughter, we give you for one daughter. If you have 2, 3, 4, and you agree for them to go back to school, and then we continue to give you monthly stipend of cash transfer every month. Of course, as I said, one of the best ways to empower women is to give them education. And we are repositioning Sokoto Girl for the future, for them to actually, as my brother Rhoda said, they are our mothers, women are our mothers, they are our wives, and they are our daughters. And if you educate a woman, I am sure not only the issue of empowering her and her children, she will make sure that the children go to school. We will not need any advocate to go to that family where the woman is educated to advocate for her to send her children to school. She will be the chief advocate. And that's why we are doing the school that they have made reference to, 3 of them. And the intention, the vision is that each of these is going to have about 3,000 boarding girls, all of, and they're ICT compliant. We are collaborating with Korean Embassy to make all of these 3 schools ICT compliant schools that are of international standard, and prepare our girls for the future. If you put the 3 together, it will give you about 3,000. That's senior secondary school, and we're establishing such schools in each of the 23 local governments for junior secondary schools. So, and the capacity of those is about 500 girls per boarding house. When you put them together, that will give you about 11,500 girls all being enrolled in these special schools, outside the other schools that we have in the state. And our enrollment drive has risen. We, from our statistics, we are having about 1.3 million out-of-school children who have already enrolled back to school, over 600,000 of those, and we are doing a lot and ensuring that we do not only enroll them, but we return them and ensure that they succeed. And that's why we have sent out of Sokoto, even to overseas, our girls to go and study sciences and medicine and medical sciences so that they come back and take job opportunities that are available and serve the people of the state. We are doing quite a lot in terms of education. That's why we enacted a free and compulsory education law in Sokoto. Each child must be taken to school, and any father or any guardian who fails to take his child to school is being penalized and is being monitored by the government and the community. I appreciate the support of our brother, Rochas Okorocha, when he came to Sokoto, and we gave him a land, and he has established one of his schools. Rochas Foundation School is working, and we're working together with him very well in the state. I assure you that we are doing our best, and as your ambassador, and I will take this charge to the Nigeria Governors Forum, and I assure you that all of us, 36 governors of Nigeria, are going to commit to this declaration and implementation for the economic and financial inclusion of women in this decade. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Please, another round of applause for our Right Honorable Speaker Emeritus, His Excellency, the Executive Governor of Sokoto State. Please, thank you so much, Alhaji Yomi Yekoya. And with those last recognitions now, and coming to the fulcrum of all of the presentations, goodwills, and the endorsement, words of support by the Excellencies, we would now like to invite His Excellency, the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, here represented by the Honorable Minister for the Federal Capital Territory, Malam Mr. Mohammed Bello, to please do us the honors of the flag-off of the domestication of the new decade 2020-2030 of women and girls, financial and economic inclusion. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Please kindly get seated. Your Excellency, the Governor of Sokoto State, Right Honorable Aminu Waziri Tambuwal, Distinguished Senator Rochas Okorocha, and Distinguished Senator Hairat Godabe, a former senator representing the Federal Capital Territory, Honorable Makinde and other members of the National Assembly present here, the representative of Her Excellency, the First Lady, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, our host, who has organized this very important occasion, Honorable Minister of Women Affairs, my twin sister, Dame Pauline Talen, OFR KSG. Representatives of all the ministers present here, the Nigerian representative in the African Union Economic, Social, and Cultural Council, Dr. Tunji Asaolu, and all the very hardworking team from AU ECOSOCC present here today. The founder of Dr. Rhoda Makinde Initiative, Ambassador Dr. Rhoda Makinde, and all your team, permanent secretaries present here, heads of government agencies, members of the diplomatic corps represented here by our senior diplomat from the Czech diplomatic mission, our development partners represented by UN Women, UNFPN, UNDP, and other agencies, including civil society organizations, members of the press, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. As was earlier indicated, I'm here representing His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, who has directed that I represent him on this very important occasion. And I'm going to read his speech. It gives me great pleasure to be at this all-important event today, which is coming on the heels of the just concluded 65th session of the African Union Commission on the Status of Women. It will be recalled that the African Union heads of states and governments had, during their 33rd summit in February of 2020, declared the years 2020 to 2030 as the new decade for women, having implemented the years 2010 to 2020 as the first African Women's Decade. The overall goal of this new African Women's Decade is to increase advocacy for every woman to work, be paid, and participate in the economy of her country. This will involve examining each country's regulatory, legislative, and policy context to determine the changes needed to foster the financial inclusion of women and to assist financial institutions in adopting approaches tailored for women as a separate market segment. This we have already started as an administration by the milestones we have achieved in promoting the voices of Nigerian women at global levels, as demonstrated by the recent appointment of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala as the Director General of the World Trade Organization. As a practical demonstration of Nigeria's commitment to the implementation and its regional and international obligation towards the advancement of women, we have again taken the lead to flag off the domestication of African Women's Decade 2020 to 2030 today here in Abuja. Inequality and poverty are intertwined, and therefore this decade will dwell specifically in building strategies around catalyzing and breaking that cycle that has held women and girls back for so many decades. As a government, we remain committed to promoting women's inclusion into governance and decision-making at all levels of the Nigerian economy. I wish to reiterate this administration's commitment to advance the cause of Nigerian women as a credible force